be the first to welcome you to what is the 5th annual Poolside Chat. I think we might need to rename it now. We're not actually at a pool, but I tell you, Mother Nature is, she's quite a crafty little thing. We woke up this morning and saw the storms and said, there's no way we beat the pool. We were really smart to switch this, and then at 4 o'clock the sun came out. We could probably get the pool right now. So anyway, we want to make sure that it was safe for everybody, enjoyable. So I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. For those that have not met before, my name is Rich Van Hoff. I serve as your general manager, and I'm also a resident here going on 16 years. So I do appreciate y'all being here tonight. In addition to, some folks have asked me already why we're at the clubhouse tonight. So I want to tell you about a really cool event going on there very quickly. At the clubhouse tonight, we have about 300 people that are there with a big fundraiser to support the Boy Scouts of America. So that was a great cause. We thought about moving up there, but we didn't want to kick out the Boy Scouts. And we thought about going inside the pool of the fitness center, but there was moms and tots and babies and moms taking swim lessons. We said we can't kick them out. So we said, well, Mad Board's a great venue, so we appreciate everyone's flexibility in coming up here tonight. If you've not been to one of these talks before, just very quickly the reason why we do this. When I came to my job 6 years ago, we used to do this sort of thing about once a year. Once a year we got together, the management gave updates to membership, and they lasted about 3 hours. And the first one I did lasted 3 hours, and people were falling asleep and leaving. It was torture for all of us. So we said, why don't we do this a little more often? And let's create an opportunity for our membership to have a chance to engage with the management, a chance for updates, and as we'll talk about tonight, an opportunity to really provide some good education, share some really cool information. So that's why we do these, just so we can share information. This event, the second one of the year, has been historically our Poolside Chat, but it's really been more around some educational stuff, and equal to education, an opportunity to come together with fellowship and community and get a chance to break bread with each other and do things that we used to do when we were smaller. So again, welcome, appreciate y'all being here tonight, and I've got something a little bit different for you this evening. I know several folks have said they were hoping I might just talk about the same old stuff, so if you hope I would, I'm going to disappoint you tonight. I thought y'all get a kick out of that. What we do tonight is I'm going to share about 5 minutes of updates with you, just things that I'm often asked about a number of homes and communities, some really tactical updates. But I'm going to spend most of the time tonight, given that we are now 20 years old as a community, I'm going to spend a little bit of time tonight telling you the story of River Landing. It's a really cool story that dates back over 55 years. And there's elements of the story that I just learned 2 weeks ago when I sat down with Mr. Wendell. So I'm going to share with you a story that you've not all heard. I'm sure you've not heard all of it. And my guess is many of you haven't heard most of it. But we're 20 years old. And you know, what do you often do when you go to a birthday party? You sit around, you tell stories, you have cake, and you break bread with each other. And we're going to do all that tonight. So I'll spend some time telling you the story. We also have a little surprise at the end, seeing how this is a birthday party. We're going to have a real neat presentation at the end. But to start off, those that asked me to be quick tonight, you're going to have to forgive me, and let me apologize for, I need to take just a minute, folks, to tell a few people in this room that how much I appreciate them, because a community like ours doesn't operate with just me or just a few people. It takes a lot of people. And first and foremost, you know, the residents of this community, I've said it for 6 years, that's a privilege and joy being your general manager, and it is one of the true joys of my life. So I do appreciate everyone that makes this community great from a membership perspective. We have people that work, and many that I saw here tonight, that work tirelessly in the Advisory Board of Governors, the ASC, the ABG, the POA Board, the RL Gals, the MGA. There's a lot of people that make this place real special. So that all of you guys, thank you very much for what you do out here. And the staff that put together tonight, you know, yesterday afternoon at about, I don't know, Brittany was about 4 o'clock yesterday, we said, okay, change of plans, we're going inside. And they had to take everything they did. We've got some great displays for you tonight, but setting up this entire building, I appreciate the work they do every day for us. And finally, kind of answering a housekeeping question. I know y'all thought you were coming for dinner tonight, right? And no one sees any dinner tables or anything set up like that. So I'd love to say, hey, gotcha, no dinner, but we actually do have dinner. And just for kind of a pace of what we're on tonight, we'll be downstairs by 7 o'clock, and we've got a great dinner set up, and the entire downstairs is set up for your pleasure. So the entire area there's a buffet set up, it's seating for your enjoyment. So we'll hope you spend a lot of time downstairs tonight and doing the community stuff that we know we all love doing. So updates, and I'll make this very, very quick. I've got to put my Yankee head on here real quickly. I'm going to talk fast, but I'll tell you everything I'm going to tell you tonight. I'm happy to send to you in an email if you want to see it all, or come online, we can talk about it in more detail, but I'm going to talk a little quickly so we can get through this. In terms of the community and some quick updates, currently we are at 437 homes in our community. We're on pace this year to probably finish somewhere in the 18 to 20 additional homes, so the pace of building is starting to pick up. We're excited about that. Intercoastal Realty is doing a better job than we ever could have even dreamed. If you've not yet spent time to meet Keith Beatty and Keith Suttle, I saw Keith Suttle here in the back of the room. I hope you'll stop over to the Welcome Center and introduce yourself and welcome into our community. They have been amazing, guys. They've allowed us to get back into the real estate world in a very relevant way and with a reach well beyond what we could do on our own. So I appreciate Intercoastal, and again, if you've not met them, even if you're not trying to sell your home site, I'd love for you to stop up and say, hey, welcome them. They're a vital part of our community. In terms of the golf course, if you've been on the golf course in the past week, I think you'll agree with me. The golf course is in great shape. And certainly staff out there is doing a wonderful job. And to be May 3rd and have the greens in the shape we have them is really a pretty special thing. And that group has continued to do a super job for us. But you'll also notice that the golf course is now, since our talk this time last year, we rolled out what we call the Sustainability Initiative. That was not just a one-time, fill up some airtime talking about something campaign. That was really an effort for us to figure out how we make sure that we are relevant and sustainable for years to come. And so you've seen things like our recycle bins, some of the no-mow areas, some of the additional grasses planted in the golf course, and you will continue doing some of that stuff. A lot of what you've seen is kind of the pace that we're on, but from the conservation easement to all those small practices, hopefully it leads us up to a place where we're leaders in community. And when people talk about sustainable golf courses in 21st century communities, hopefully we want them thinking about us. I've had some conversations in the past few weeks with several members about our restaurant and the dining. And, some of the conversations have been very good. Some folks say they love the new menu. Some say they don't love the menu. Some say they want additional items on them. I know dining is very, very important to all of our members. Regardless if you're a socialist, sports, or golf member, everybody has access to dining privileges. And statistically, 80% of our residents eat in our restaurant at least once a week. So we know that of all the folks that come here and that live here, the restaurant's very, very important. And one thing that I'm considering doing, I think we may roll out fairly quickly, is a survey to our entire membership asking about ideas and things you would like to see in our restaurant. We have an amazing chef, a world-renowned chef, but he's only as good as he can prepare food that you all want to eat and that you want to buy. So he's put together this new menu. It's his first menu. We need ideas. That menu will be changing. It'll be kind of an evolving menu. So I want to make sure that we understand what it is that is of interest to you. So I haven't even talked to my hospitality staff about this yet. I need to, but we'll hopefully be rolling out some ideas, suggestions, and perhaps a survey shortly to make sure we understand exactly what it is that you guys want in dining. A couple updates on projects in the community right now. You've seen several things happening. Yesterday we started our paving project on the roads back in Legacy Point. Some of those areas we started paving. Of course, Mother Nature had to kind of joke with us after months of planning. She jumped in and made it rain and slowed us down a little bit. But what we're doing there is simply trying to pave a few roads at a time so we can get out ahead of it, hit the hardest areas first, the roughest areas first, and then sequentially move throughout the community. So it's not something that will happen entirely in 1 year, but we're excited to be moving forward in that project. For those that have taken to the sport of pickleball, I know I've gotten flooded with emails in the past couple of days of thanks for the pickleball courts. For those that have no idea what I'm talking about, pickleball is a sport that's kind of like tennis, kind of like ping pong, kind of like badminton, but it's really not like any of them. It's just a new sport. And what we did is we took what was becoming a deteriorated basketball court and we simply repainted it with the basketball stripes, but also pickleball stripes. So I think it's set now where I think so 3 pickleball courts can play on it. Thank you. So easy to please our members, I'll tell you, it's awesome. But we were happy to do that, and that was an idea that came from membership, and so hopefully people are happy with that. If you've driven down Padua, which all of you have recently, you'll notice that there's been a fairly significant project limbing up a bunch of trees. If you own a motorhome, I'm sure you're appreciative. If big trucks, you're probably appreciative too. We had situations simply where limbs are starting to come onto over the road. They were shade drowning out the sunlight, so the shade was creating a lot of problems in our grass. And the last thing, we love the fact that we're 20 years old, but we don't want to look old. We want to look like a relevant new community, so we're going to be resodding the dirt areas you saw up there. We're resodding those and reseeding those areas to continue making the community look new, but also make sure we get back to a place where it's sustainable. In the back, you may have seen some pictures when you came in, and they'll be downstairs after dinner. There's some pictures of 20 years ago, river landing the main entrance. You wouldn't believe what it looked like back then. And when you see those trees, that a lot of them weren't taller than me, 6'3", they were. And to see what they are right now was really amazing. But we want to make sure we stay out there and keep those trees trimmed and the grass growing, the shrubbery growing, and everything else. And finally, in terms of major projects we've done, on the landing course to the right side of number 5, there's been a project that, again, Mother Nature's not been our friend on this one. It's taken a while for us to get the project to a point near completion, but it's a spillway, and if you're not a golfer, you won't even know what I'm talking about. But there's a spillway to the right that's actually strategically very important because it actually drains a lake that's up in the green on 5. And it actually runs out to a ditch, which part of it runs out to the irrigation lake for the landing course. So moving that water is very important, and we've had to re-engineer that. And you see some of the dirt that was taken from that area is put up behind a tee box, extend that tee box a little bit. And that project's near completion, but was certainly a big one. We appreciate everyone's patience. We had a real big event a little while ago, this past month at the club, that I want to talk on just real briefly because it was something that I hope everyone can be very, very proud of. We hosted the 10th anniversary Sheriff's Ball at the clubhouse back on April 2nd. The work that you all do and the permission you give us every day to do things like this, it matters. And I know you saw stuff in the newspapers about the money raised, but they made a few errors, and that happens oftentimes when you're doing a quick analysis, you kind of run up quickly. But I want to share with you some of the numbers that happened that evening so you can understand the impact of what you all did that night. The net proceeds, which means all the revenue generated minus the expenses for the evening, the net proceeds for that night were $66,679. And all of that money goes to the children of Duplin County. We're all privileged to call River Landing home. And for one night, we got to welcome a community in to partake and generate $66,000 of profit for them. By comparison's sake, the biggest year they had prior to this year was raising a gross of $60,000. So we netted $6,000 more than the largest gross year ever. There was a lot of work, there's a lot of people put a lot of heart into that, and a lot of you came out and supported that evening and bought raffle items, and we appreciate it. And for those that couldn't make it this year, we appreciate you giving up your club. With that, I'm going to personally fall on a sword because we made a mistake with that event that we're going to do our best not to make again. And even though we talked about it, we failed in a communication effort where we didn't get out and let the membership know that if you were not attending the event that night, that the dining room was closed. We failed. I failed on that. We should have communicated it. Lord knows we talked about it, but we never got it out. We're going to make sure we don't do that again. If you choose not to attend an event, we want to make sure that everyone's well informed. So that one falls squarely on my shoulders. And it's a couple of quick updates. Hopefully the Warriors Invitational is coming back again this year. We're excited about having that back. It's April 14th and 15th. And if Tom Green's in the house, I'm sorry, August 14th, 15th. Sorry, August 14th and 15th. It's going to be called the Hopeful Warriors Invitational this year. It's a Scarlet Gold from last year, just renamed. It's coming back, and Tom Green has volunteered, if he would say that's in fact what he has done, to head up the volunteers again. And every year we've had over 100 members come out and support that event. And as you know, 92 cents of every dollar that's raised for Hope of the Warriors goes to support the families that are wounded. So it's a great cause, great opportunity this summer. It's coming August 14th and 15th. You know, additionally, there's a lot of other really neat events going on this year. The All Gals Invitational. There's just some really cool things, the Thanksgiving Day event. There's a lot of events coming up. But I would like to make a plea to you all that, you know, one thing is we're 20 years old. We can celebrate tonight, talk about all the great things that got us here. But we want to make sure that the next 20 years is hopefully better than the last 20. And the only way we do that is making sure our community stays vibrant. And if there are things we've done in the past that you don't want to do anymore, that's okay. We're not offended by that. We can change. But we need to know about new ideas and things folks want to do. So in addition to these opportunities, you know, last week we took a group to UNCW and 25 members went to a baseball game and hot dogs. It was a great night. And that came from a member who said, hey, why don't we go to a ball game as a family out here? So ideas like that are important to us. Bring them to me, bring them to Sabrina, bring them to Larry. Bring us ideas and things that make living here at River Landing as good as it can be. With that, I'm going to move on to what I think is a really cool thing, and I hope you all find this cool too. So the story of River Landing. You know, we're all sitting in this room today because sequentially a lot of things happened in our lives. And most people were not even living in this area. Many were not in the state. I'm guessing maybe there are a few people that weren't even born when the idea and the thought and all the sequential events of River Landing started to roll in place. So the story that I want to tell, it's gonna cross almost 6 decades, but it's all important and it all connects and it tells a story which is altogether a great entrepreneurial story. It's a great story of family. It's a great story of commitment. And believe it or not, it is a story that started with 2 friends driving through a country road 55 years ago. And from that trip down the road, today we have everything that we have out here. So if you were to permit me just about, less than 30 minutes, I'm gonna get you downstairs for dinner. I'd like to take you through that. And we've got some really neat things in terms of the very beginnings, how this stuff all started. I've got timelines for you tonight, and we've got displays of timelines also that I think you'll find interesting. And again, all this can be shared with you. But I'm often asked questions like, when did the Matador come about? Or when was a landing course built? Or when was the club built? These are questions that were often asked. And truth be told, when you ask me those questions, I've got to run and usually go to Dawn because she knows a lot more than I do about this place. And we try to get the answer. Tonight, I've got timelines for you. So if you're ever wondering when things came about, I'm going to share it with you. The story about why we're here, why River Landing was built, what River Landing was supposed to be originally compared to what it is today. One of the neatest parts, I think, of the story is talking about the land. You know, what was the land before we got here? Who were our predecessors on this land? What's the history behind that? Where's the name River Landing come from? Why? Is there historical significance, or we just make it up? Really neat stuff. And then finally, I'm going to end with stuff that if anyone knows all these items, you will shock me. But I'm going to tell you about a whole bunch of little known facts that next time you're golfing, you can take a look around, or if someone's not here, you can tell your buddies a fact you don't know. It's pretty neat stuff and all relative to River Landing. So let me start this story by going right back to the very earliest beginnings. If you watched the PBS special a couple years ago on Wendell Murphy, you've seen pieces of this. And I'm sure your salespeople, when you bought land here or home here, told you pieces of it, and your buddies probably told you pieces of it, and probably a lot of it's wrong. What I'm going to tell you tonight is all things that are historically factual and accurate, but sequentially leads up to why we're here. So here's the story. It starts back in 1960. Wendell Murphy graduated from North Carolina State University. I've got Red on tonight. I know he's here. So Larry brought me up to the pro shop and said, I've got some new golf shirts with the new River Landing 23rd logo on it. And he said, what color do you want, blue or red? We just kind of laughed. He said, there's only one color. So North Carolina State University is the beginning of it. When Wendell graduates, he begins teaching. I'd always heard they began teaching in junior high. I heard once it was elementary school. He actually began teaching in high school at Hookerton High School. That was in Snow Hill, North Carolina, just down the road, which is no longer in existence. He later went on to teach at a school called Chinkopin High School, which is no longer in existence, and then on to East Duplin, which was a consolidation of a bunch of schools. So he starts teaching high school and teaching VOAG, and you know, as Mr. Wendell's told a story, he always enjoyed agriculture. He knew he wanted to be involved in agriculture, but teaching probably wasn't the thing that was going to be his call. So he starts off teaching, and then comes the drive down a country road. So this now dates back about 55 years. Wendell's driving down to the backcountry roads in our area, and he's driving with a friend of his by the name of Billy Register. And Mr. Register looks at a feed mill and says, wow, one of those would be really well by us, don't you think, out in Duplin County? And Wendell said at that point, he said, the light came on. And he said, I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. So he went home and started doing research and started trying to figure out what does it take to start a feed mill, and is there a business there that works? He realized there was, and realized that to start a feed mill over in the Register's Crossroad area in Duplin County, that was going to take about $13,000. This is also often misquoted part of the story. So it was going to take $13,000 to go build this feed mill. And Wendell had saved up at that time, this family, $3,000. And he knew he needed $10,000 to go start this mill. So he went and talked to his dad. His dad's name was Holmes Murphy. And this was a neat part of the PBS story too. Wendell said the toughest sales job he ever had was trying to convince his dad to co-sign a note for $10,000. And at that time now, to kind of keep it in perspective, a teacher salary in Duplin County at that time, in the early 60s, was $4,080. So a note for $10,000 was not what we may think of. Today's a lot of money, but in the early 1960s, 61, it was a lot of money. And Wendell's dad right out said absolutely not. He was a product of the generation where you didn't borrow money. He came through the Depression, and folks that successfully came through that time knew that you eat what you grow, you don't borrow, you live off land, you do things responsibly, we don't borrow money. So Wendell went away and he said, okay, he was not going to let that be the final answer. And then, as Mr. Wendell told me a few weeks ago, a fascinating part of the story, he said from that point on, the time he got to know, he said every night he went to his mom's and dad's house for dinner. And then he would often go over there, a couple times a week, but he went every single night for dinner until he wore his dad down. And finally, Mr. Holmes said, yes, I will do it, we'll co-sign, but on one condition, and you're going to work at your day job until we get this all paid off. And we want to get paid off as quickly as possible. So Mr. Wendell agreed to that. They got that note. And again, $4,080, you think of how long it would take to be able to, if you saved every dime of it, it's going to take several years to pay off. But he accepted that. He went to work. He opened up Register's Feed Mill in 1962. And this is where the story now kind of starts really feeding into why in the world does River Landing have to be here. So when the feed mill opens up, for those not familiar with how a feed mill works, a feed mill is simply, they would take corn and other nutrients and create feed product for all different types of livestock. So they would take the corn from farmers, they would grind it, they would mix it with nutrients and sell it back to farmers. And then, this is part of the really entrepreneurial part of the story. So as Mr. Wendell told that they would be doing this, and they realized that there was product that was waste product in that. Things like the hull, the husks, and things like that. And instead of having to burn it or discard of it, which would cost money, he said maybe we could use some of that waste product from the corn and start grinding it up differently. So they came up with a different type of machine to do that. And they create feed using that. So now they not only have waste to get rid of, they've also got more bulk in a product that helps them generate more product and more profit. So they start doing really well. They're selling feed. Things are going pretty well. And then something happened in 1964 that, again, is one more step in why we're here. And I bet people would not know that because the invention of a combine is a big reason why, things progressed to the point we're at today. So in 1964, the first combines arrived in North Carolina. And now what a combine is in a field, if you're not familiar with it, if you are, forgive me for the remedial, but they'll take corn in the field, and instead of cutting it down and bring it all in, it'll actually take their corn in the field and take the kernels off it and discard the waste product out there. So he knew he needed another source of revenue to start coming up with another product line, some invention, something entrepreneurial, something new, because he knew part of his feed product revenue has gone away. And basically, that's when they started growing pigs on the farm. And the first pigs, I understand it was a few hundred and a few thousand, and things were growing and doing pretty well. The swine business was doing well. And then back when the PBS story came out, I learned something that I'd never known before. It was because of an unfortunate event that, again, sequentially, more things started happening. So the Murphy farm has got several thousand pigs on it, and they were infected by swine disease. It was called cholera. And it was a disease that was not good. And the U.S. government at the time said the way to get rid of this is you've got to eradicate the entire herd. And when you do, you bury them, and the farm is quarantined for a period of 6 months. And so when the herd got cholera, the herd on the farm went away. And then it was one of the most humble things that I've heard. Wendell said at that point, I know I want to keep on growing pigs, but I couldn't do it on our farm. So because of need, I reached out to neighboring farms. I reached out to other people in the area that I knew, friends, and said, hey, if I can go and use your farm, use the land, we can grow pigs on your land and I'll pay you for them. And hence the beginning of contract growing. And one of the most humble parts of that story is, Wendell shared with me a couple weeks ago that had that unfortunate event not occurred, he said, I don't know if I would have had the foresight to actually start contract growing. We might all done on our own. But because of a bad situation, he took a bad situation and made it good. So contract growing begins. In 1968, they stopped selling feed. They focused primarily then on the farming business, Murphy Family Farms. The business starts growing, doing well. We jumped through the 70s, it was a great time, to the 80s. In 1980s, Murphy Family Farms is growing now, the business is doing well. In the 80s also, Wendell's dad was still a partner in the business. He was doing well, he was very instrumental and engaged in growing that business. And so in the early 80s, around 1982, once again some friends came to Wendell and said, hey, you know, you'd be a really good legislator and you ought to consider running for office. And in 1983, Mr. Wendell was elected to the North Carolina House of Representatives. The story I didn't know was that he won every single precinct. And in his time in the House, developed great relationships that enabled him a couple years later, 1989, to run for the North Carolina Senate and won that as well. Now, so we're up into the 90s, and now in the 90s is when Murphy Family Farms really starts rolling. So they start producing, the business is doing very, very well, and they discover they have another need. And the need is that employees are trying to recruit to the area. There's really just not a lot of places to live near Rose Hill at that time. So they're recruiting and trying to get top-level talent in, and talent may come here. And if you're talking about the 80s, Highway 40 wasn't here yet. So you can think about trying to recruit top-level executives, there's no place to live. And so Wendell said, you know, I'll take care of that problem. I'll see if there's some lots or homes in the area that I can go buy. I know some communities still in existence. He looked at the homes and looked at home sites and said, that's not an option for us. So hence came the birth of the idea of, we'll go build a place. We have 300 acres out there in the countryside by the Cape Fear River. Let's go ahead and think about building a little community for our employees. And that was the humble beginnings of how River Landing started. So in 1991, the planning begins for River Landing. And if you've not ever met Pete Murphy, Pete's a great guy, a younger brother to Wendell. And Wendell was so busy in the business with his dad and others that he said, all right, Pete, you know what? I'd like you to go ahead and start developing us a nice little community out there by the river, and a couple hundred home sites, and maybe a golf course, and a small pool, and a small clubhouse. Let's make it a good place for our employees to live. And if you've had the pleasure of meeting Pete, you know that Pete doesn't do anything second rate. And I've heard Mr. Wendell tell the story several times. All of a sudden, he showed up out here one day and went, whoa, like look at that wall, and look at all this stuff. And River Landing had become a real prized community. In 1993, began a development work at River Landing. And one thing a lot of folks don't know is, you know, what you see on top of the ground out here, you know, it's a lot of stuff, but it's only part of the stuff. Development work in terms of land planning and water plans and sewer plans and all the infrastructure, things you can't see, account for a significant part of how you start developing a community. 1994, Clyde is hired and construction begins on the river course. I'm going to tell you some facts about the river course later that I'm quite certain most of you don't know, but I think you'll find interesting. In 1996, we had the grand opening. It was June of 1996. So if anyone's wondering where we literally turned 20 years old, it's this coming month. Also in 1996, we sold the first home site. In 1997, the first home was built. And the earliest homes in here, there was a few homes in Candlewood, and there were a few homes in River Ridge. One of those early homes was Lawrence Parks. The family still lives here today. Lawrence has told me stories when he used to come in here in the early days. They met up at the front, there was no gate, it was just a dirt road. They jumped on four-wheelers and ran all the way back to where his house was going to be. So the Parks was one of the earlier homes. Where the Hare family lives right now, that was one of the earliest homes from one of the earliest executives that worked for the Murphy family. And then where Hutch and Kendra Jones live, on the backside of number 15, the big, beautiful, kind of two-story white house, told that was the first house that was actually started and completed here in River Landing. Timeline moves on now. In 1998 is the grand opening of the outdoor pool. 1999, Holiday Inn Express opens for business in September. Was anyone in that hotel the first night it opened up? Who is that back there? Gotcha. So there was two of us in the hotel that night when it opened up. I remember the hotel was pretty full. Carrie and I were staying. I think we had Joseph with us. And do you remember that night the alarm went off at sometime 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, something. And I don't know this to be fact, but what I'm told is that there was some nefarious activity going on the third floor. And there was a honeymoon suite with a big tub that overflowed. And it got into the system, and the alarm went off, and that day it was raining cats and dogs. And All of a sudden, we're sitting outside of this brand new, gorgeous hotel. A unique experience, sleeping in sheets and a bed and everything for the very first time. But it was a good night, capped off by a trip to the parking lot, I think, at 2 in the morning. 2000, Murphy Family Farms is sold to Smithfield. In 2001, the Mad Boar opens up. Those that were here remember the membership had a special invitation to come and enjoy that evening. It was a great night. Mad Boar's come a long, long way since 2001. 2002, the Village Store opened up in May of 2002. The River Lodge was completed in 2003. The Fitness Center was completed with the indoor pool in 2005. We had about 500 people at that grand opening. It was an amazing night. 2006, the landing course was completed, and by that I mean the final 9 holes was completed. Downstairs, you'll see that big board when you walked in. That board is sometime prior to this period, it's probably the early 2000s. It shows what the land plan was in, and the golf holes are all different. Number 1 on landing right now used to be number 10 of River, so the numbers all got reconfigured. But again, I'd love to spend time with anybody and tell you how it used to be and how it's transitioned to what it is today. 2008, we had a blessing of the vines and the vineyards, and then in 2009 was probably the party of the century as we opened up the clubhouse. It was a grand, lavish affair and a great time. That's the timeline in a nutshell. Again, when people say, why are we here? We are here for a very simple reason that in the early days, it was a need to fulfill for the family farming business to have a place for employees to live. And then a phenomenon happened, and I can say this because I'm a Yankee too, the Yankees started coming. We all started coming out in droves, and I think Carrie and I got here in maybe 1998 or 99, and we all started coming. And what happened was around that time, Florida kind of became a little passe. And, you know, from the halfbacks, people went down there, came halfway back home. North Carolina was a real big stopping ground. And a lot of places and points up north, North Carolina became the new place. So what began as a place for employees to live, all of a sudden, we all started coming to buying home sites. And things just started growing, evolving. But River Landing was never meant to be a retirement community for us. We just got to kind of piggyback and tail on a process that had already started before us. As I mentioned, was about 300 home sites. It was land mostly between Candlewood and back in River Ridge. Originally, there was 18 holes. I'm going to tell you a little interesting tidbit about that in a few minutes. But the first lot was 18 holes. We have somewhere up in our office a plan for the first clubhouse, which was 6,000 square feet. And today, obviously, things have grown and evolved, but it was never meant to be what it is. It's just evolved in a really cool way. So the story about the land. The land that we inhabit today, we weren't the first ones to inhabit it. There's a really great history. And I've offered everyone maybe a chance for a little field trip to go see some of this stuff, because it's really pretty special. But the first parcel of land that was acquired for what is now River Landing, and I'm talking about both sides of the street, was about 990 acres. It was purchased from a gentleman named Mr. Taylor. Beyond that first 990 acres, say we're about 1,700 acres on both sides, or roughly about 1,700 acres. Beyond that, there were about 13 different families that sold land to us to create what is now all of River Landing. And it was interesting when I was researching this, a lot of the names I knew, and I think you may know these names from church or your social gatherings. Some of the names of people that sold us land, but those 13 families were the families of Pace, Keith, Harold, Kenyon, King, Golden, Dale, Teachy, whoever said it, they had that right, it was Teachy, Corbett, the Filial family, the Murray family, the Rainers, and Kelly. So there were a lot of different acquisitions over the years that, if you remember in the early days of River Landing, the vineyards was, we didn't even know we had that over there, but there was parcels of land that were acquired, the commercial plazas, the village store. In fact, where we're sitting on right now, roadies go through us. If you go towards the River Village gate, actually it's easier coming from the River Village gate this direction, you'll notice that the road veers off to the left a little bit. And there's a pavement stub that goes straight forward. That stub used to come right under this building. And that was the original road for Lake Lehman parcels out back. And so when this was acquired, the land was acquired, they shifted that road to be able to provide access to the back, but also put the hotel and the restaurant here. We also own some land across the river. We've talked a lot about that in the past. It's plus or minus 1,000 acres. and that was actually the second acquisition as well. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that shed up front, because if I was saying what is the most common question I get, it's about what is that building up front near the main gate. I'm going to tell you about that in just a minute. With the land and with our predecessors, we did some research a couple years ago. Back in 2011, I did a history presentation. I think I had 50 people there, so I know there's at least 250 of you guys have never heard this before. But it was really neat kind of looking back saying, who lived in this land before us? What was their trade? What did they do? And this is what we were able to gain from our research. We know that River Landing in our area was home to nomadic Indians dating back records as far as several thousand years ago. But the most specific records we can find was by a captain in the Spanish Navy. His name was Captain Salazar. And we know that he landed in this area around 1515. In 1664, quite a few years before, in 1664, there was an English explorer by the name of William Hilton. He was the first one that is recorded to have traveled up and down what was at that time called the Northeast Cape Fear River. It was not changed to Cape Fear until many years later. It was F-A-I-R, the Northeast Cape Fear River. So he traveled up from Wellington, and he was the first known person to migrate and travel through this area and start to explore. We know that in 1725 is when the Welsh started migrating to North Carolina. They started settling in this area. A lot of the early Welsh were Presbyterians. They came from a place called Pencader Hundred. And we know that they settled along the banks of the Northeast Cape Fear River. At the time, one of the tricky things in research was, this was all in Hanover County at that time. So it was really kind of tough trying to delineate how far did Captain Salazar go. But there's some things that I'll tell you in a moment that make me believe they came a long way, perhaps as far up as we are right now. In the 1730s, 1740s, more settlers came. Was the German Palatines, the Swiss, Scot-Irish, African-Americans, French Huguenots, and they all came and started settling along the riverbanks. The reason why they started settling on the riverbanks, first of all, again, if there wasn't a highway in 1989, there was not one in the 1700s. So navigating into this region, the Northeast Cape Fear River at the time was a major source of thoroughfare for trade. Thinking of our river out there as being a major avenue for trade is kind of tough, because today, in August, you can usually walk across it, and a lot of times in August, you walk across without getting your knees wet. You're like, how would that have ever been a major source of trade? But in fact, it was. The trade that was common and popular back in that day was referred to as naval stores. I didn't know that term before. Naval stores was the major industry, and I'm going to quote here, if you've not heard that term before, exactly what naval stores was. It said naval stores is a broad term which originally applied to resin-based components used in building and maintaining wood sailing ships. The category included cordage, mast, turpentine, rosin, pitch, and tar. In today's language, it's stuff that comes from pine trees. Pine sap and derivatives of pine trees was the first kind of industry in naval stores that were shipped. Now, I found a gentleman at NC State who seemed to be the most versed in what those early days were and why the name came about, and sort of what the early industry was here. This guy was by the name of John McGeechee from NC State. And I'm going to quote some of this to make sure that I get it right. But Mr. McGeechee said that there are, quote, access points along the river that were called river landings. He said to avoid being driven back upriver, quote unquote, upriver, raftsmen often tied their vessels up in these landings during rising tides as a current was a major source of their propulsion, unquote. So that makes you think about something. This river is not tidal today. It does not rise in tide. It only flows in one direction. So Mother Nature has done some things to change some things. But according to Mr. McGeechee, these landings that are out there are where the rafts would pull off. When they were going upstream, when the tide turned, they would go into these landings, and they would tie up and wait for the tide to turn again. Then they would untie and drift off with the tides in direction that they chose. What is really interesting is that there is a landing on an old map I saw in my research. There is a landing, one of the earliest recording landings is called Pond Landing. And Pond Landing is in a point between the 7th green of the river course and the 8th green. It's right down in that area down there. It was the earliest recorded landing that I could find anywhere. It was called Pond Landing. And we have a little parcel of land that you probably never put your feet on. You probably hit a golf ball into it if you hook golf shots on the left side of number 9. That's a parcel we actually refer to now as Pond Landing. Some of the vessels I found fascinating that we used to transport the naval stores. A lot of the earlier vessels, rafts, they were called periaugers. And a periauger was a different type of raft that was made of cypress. Later on, there were reputed to be paddle wheel boats that navigated up the river. So it starts to make you think how big the river must have been, how deep it must have been. I know that even behind the river lodge, the river has changed over the years. Where that horseshoe back there, you can kind of see the horseshoe that bends behind. That area, I'm told, used to be kind of a major access for the river. That the river wasn't, the major flow wasn't right behind the river lodge, it kind of went through the horseshoe. So we know that over time, the river changes, but thinking that it was tidal and paddle wheel boats may have come down it is quite remarkable. And McGeechee went on to say that the raftsmen, and I'll quote again, he said, were often slaves, landless freedmen, indentured servants, or other, and I quote, unfortunates possessed of strong limbs and no better opportunity. I think that's probably pretty fair. So the thinking of, we talked about 55 years ago and how we all started. This land and the use of land, there's such historical basis and information and the reason why the community is called what it is. And knowing that we date back into the 1500s and the first people treaded out here, in the 1700s we became kind of a thoroughfare for business. And we know that sitting, when you get off that 7th green and everyone made the birdie that you were planning on the tee box, you actually put in for that 4. What happened to your left down there dates back hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's a really neat thing. And then you kind of fast forward into the family business and the progression and the evolution of that business and the need for homes and how River Landing was built and where we're at today. It's just a story that is cool. That drive 55 years ago is part of what brought us all in this room today. I'm going to finish up here with a couple facts about River Landing. They're really pretty much little known facts. And again, if you want a copy of these to share with people, I'm happy to share these with you guys. There are remnants of what we believe to be one of the original rafts used during that time. We have not had it dated, but there are remnants of raft that when the river's low, you can see. And if you've never seen it and don't know what I'm talking about, I'd be happy to take anybody in a golf cart and let's go look at it. It's a neat part of history. And this remnant of a raft, if you're standing on the 7th green of the river course and look down to your left, there's what looks like several telephone poles kind of tied together, sloping down into the water. And I've never seen it, but I'm told there was another one a little further down. I've never seen that one. But this one, when the river's low in the summertime, you can see it, and it's pretty recognizable that there's several of these big logs tied together. I mentioned Interstate 40. Most people didn't know that it was June 29th of 1990 that Highway 40 connected. As you probably know, it goes all the way from Wilmington to California, but this was one of the last stretches to connect Raleigh to Wilmington. That was 1990. The shed at the entrance. I've learned things about this shed recently. I've heard it called a smokehouse. I've heard it called all kinds of things. What we can best tell is that it may have simply just been a tool shed, but it was original to this land when we got here, and it was on its original location. And there's actually a picture in the back or downstairs on that table that'll show you what that original shed looked like. And the shed today is on the exact same location, but it was rebuilt a couple years ago because it was falling apart. So it's original wood, the best we could use it, but it's on the original location. And it could have been a smoke shed, but the way it lean-tos off to the side kind of gave it away as being a place that they might have stored some tools and basically a tool shed. It is a great place for pictures. I think every year my kids have a picture in front of that shed. So it's a neat little thing, that big tree. I don't know if that big tree is next to it, but it's a really cool place for pictures. I've been often asked the question, when we created the nature trail, why do we name it the Myra Murphy Nature Trail? And many don't know that in addition to Wendell, Joyce, and Pete, who are the 3 siblings of the family, there was a 4th sibling, and her name was Myra. And when she was 7 years old in 1947, she passed away. So that nature trail also has significance known as part of our founder family, and it's It's a remembrance of Myra. There have been, those who've been here for a while remember this, we've had several notable celebrities at River Landing over the years. We've had several very notable athletes. A couple that certainly come to mind is, you've noticed the past couple of years, Johnny Bench has been a ready and very willing participant in the Scarlet Gold Invitational. You may not have seen a couple of years ago that when the Major League Baseball Association came out with their top team of all time, their 9 best players ever, Johnny Bench was a catcher on that team. He's also in the Hall of Fame, and if you've never seen something Johnny signs, first of all, his hands are enormous. You've got to meet this guy. And he'll be back this summer, so if you have a chance to meet him, it'd be great. But Johnny signs everything. Johnny Bench, HOF 89, Hall of Fame 89s. I don't think there's a cooler way to be able to sign your name. But Johnny comes here and has become a real strong supporter of River Landing. He's blogged about us, tweeted about us. He's been a big supporter. Those that remember the Green Machine, the Celtics back in the 80s, may remember ML Carr. ML Carr has spent a lot of time out here at River Landing. He's a big fan of the club. Remember in the 80s, ML was a guy waving a white flag. He was the best 6th man of all time in the NBA. But he's been out here a lot and has a lot of friendships in our community. Great golfers over the years like Bobby Clampett, who's seen on TV announcing, Robert Gomez, a multiple tour winner, a lot of great athletes. But maybe the best ever, and some of you guys remember when he was out here, is Michael Jordan has been a visitor to River Landing many times. And a lot of times people don't know it because we don't fly a flag that says Michael's here. Now you realize coming in and know that it's quiet. He usually plays never less than 36, right, bro? He gets out here and he'll rip through 36 holes real quickly. And he's not as good as he says he is. I mean, I've seen him hit a golf ball. And he travels with a huge entourage. It's really pretty special. But Michael's been out here many, many times. And in fact, what some folks don't know is this area was home when Michael was young. This area is home to him. And there's a park, Clement Park in town, that the basketball court still exists. It's really in disrepair right now. But that's the court that they said Michael probably learned how to play basketball on and played a lot when he was young. And this area is something that's certainly near and dear to him. He ended up going to Laney High School and graduating from Laney and then on to Carolina. Rest is history. But this was a big part of his family. In fact, when his father was killed, tragically, several years ago, they buried him in a cemetery just on the outskirts of Wallace. And if you leave on 41 heading out towards Harrell's, it's a little cemetery. You'd never know it's there on the right-hand side, but that's where his family burial was. We've also had, and I've got about 5 minutes left, we've also had a lot of movie stars out here. You remember a couple of years ago, again, some probably don't remember this, we had a movie film out here called Arthur Newman. I know a lot of y'all were extras in that movie. It was a miserable movie. I actually tried watching it over Christmas break and it was horrible. But it was one cool, and it might have been Mr. Whalen, I'm not sure. Someone was behind the green, raising their hands when he made the putt. So we got to recognize some of our members, and it was really kind of a cool thing that we got to participate. But what was really interesting that a lot of folks don't know is Colin Firth and Emily Blunt were the stars of that movie. In 2011, Colin Firth won the Academy Award for a role that he played. I never saw the movie, it was called A King's Speech. So we actually had an Academy Award winner out here filming a major motion picture on our property. This past week, we all were kind of treated to a special little privilege that we had a TV show filming out here. Over the years, we've had TV commercials. If you're a Giant fan, I know some people love the Giants. Michael Strahan was out here a couple of years ago filming a Sports Authority commercial. I think it was an 18th hole, right, bro? Kind of a neat thing to have Strahan out here. But last week, we had the filming of Good Behavior at our clubhouse. We were contacted about it several months ago, and films, traditionally movie shoots haven't paid us that well, and it's kind of an inconvenience, and our members have to go to the side door. And I said, I'm not really sure. And I said, who's in the movie? And they said, Michelle Dockery. I said, okay, let's do it. And if y'all have watched Downton Abbey, you'll know Michelle Dockery as being Lady Mary. And if you know that show, you know she was one of the great, really mean, nasty people. It was probably my favorite character on that show. She was mean and nasty. And I'll tell you, last Sunday, Carrie had a chance to spend about half an hour with her, and she was one of the most delightful people. Humble to be here, and you would never have seen it on the show, but she has this big, beautiful smile and laughs, is engaging. You knew it was her because it looks like her, but she's not like Lady Bird in real life. But I'll tell you something that was really humbling. When she left, she was being very, very kind. She said, thank you so much. We had a great time. And what a beautiful place. And the pleasantries everyone says. Well, last Saturday, I got a phone call, and that was from a number that started with 44, and then a bunch of other numbers afterwards. So I did what everyone does. I just hit decline the call, and it went to my voicemail. Well, it was her manager from England. And her manager said, Michelle's looking at moving to the United States in a couple of years, and she loves the States, she loves North Carolina. In particular, she said River Landing is the most beautiful place she has been. And she said she would love to come back for a weekend. And I said, well, this sounds like maybe also to make a living out here too. And so we were able to take someone who's very, very well known and very well traveled and thinks very highly of us, which was great. I'll finish up with a few facts about our golf course. The first one is the waterfall in 18. 18 has always been a river our signature hole, and it's because of that waterfall. That waterfall had to be built several times. I don't think it was ever built to completion, but I know that the design of it was very complex, and it has breaches and problems, so it had to get rebuilt a couple times. And the purpose, not only is aesthetic, and it certainly is a beautiful waterfall, but it serves a purpose. That lake behind the waterfall, behind the clubhouse, that's the irrigation lake for the river course. You'll notice that very rarely goes down. We have 52 lakes in our community, and most of them either feed that lake or the lake out on the other side of the community. That's the irrigation lake for the landing course. But that lake is very, very important to the life of our community. And when it rises to a certain height, it goes over that spillway behind the fall. The water goes into a reservoir. Next time you're playing golf, and y'all go out there and take a look, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It goes into a reservoir, and then when the reservoir gets high, it falls over the water, or the waterfall. It goes down below, and when it gets high enough, it'll roll out and go into the river. But when the river's not high enough, and the lake is down low, there's actually a 1,000-gallon pump that sits down in that basin. It's a wet pump, a wet submersible pump. It's just a very difficult pump to kind of keep going the way we, in fact, it's been down recently. But the process there is it takes the water from the lower reservoir, brings it up to the upper reservoir, and it falls back over the waterfall again. So the design is not just to be pretty, it's actually meant to be a functional spillway to make sure water levels stay at the correct height. Another interesting fact that folks probably don't know is there was a time, it was more than 6 years ago before I got to the company, the wing wall on the River Ridge Bridge blew out. And you remember back in the fall, we had to shut the bridge down, and some folks said, hey, there were, those dips in the bridge, water got in those dips, and it got to about 18 inches, and we said we had to shut it down. And it was for our safety and for the safety of your cars, but it's also because of an experience we had several years ago where a truck went through there at a higher rate of speed than it should have, hit that water, and if you're heading from the club to River Ridge, that wing wall on the right blew out. And I'm not talking about it fell over. There was bricks, I went up and saw them. There was bricks up on the 18th green. So they'll show you the hydraulic force of that truck hitting that water and pushed it. It pushed bricks all the way up onto that green. And when it was rebuilt with some weep holes down below now that are better for that. But that's part of the reasons why when that water gets in those dips, we have to shut it down. The original layout on 18 River was different than it is today. It was actually a lot tougher. If you're standing on the fairway and you look over the lake, there used to be a sand trap right over the lake. And we actually have one of our old pictures back here. The reason why it was so tough, if you're a golfer, think about it for a second. If your ball was in that sand trap, you just get over the lake, and it's sitting in a sand trap. Now, if the pin's on the front side of the green, you might be able to see the top of the flag. If it's on the back, and if you held the flag and jumped up and down, you couldn't see it. So you're probably 15 feet below the surface in a sand trap, and to carry another sand trap was horrible. So after Floyd, they got rid of that sand trap and planted with grass, made it a much, much better hole. This is something I learned last year from when Clyde was out here. Number 8 River was not the original design either. Clyde designed number 8, so as you're teeing off, you hit that landing area and the sand trap ahead of you. The original design Clyde put together was for the green to be straight up that hill, straight up in front of you. Kind of up where there's home sites up there now. And so Clyde designed it, and he was telling us a story of dinner last year. He said, I came back one year, and all of a sudden, he goes, number 8 changed. And I guess one of the gentlemen who was one of the earlier land players out here said, nah, I don't like that, let's move the green over here. And Clyde had no clue. But luckily, he came back and said, yeah, I like it a lot more. So that green was changed. But if you ever look down in that hollow down there now, there's a lot of trees down there. There's tree stumps. Those used to be real trees. Prior to Floyd, you actually had to hit over or around a bunch of trees. So the holes are much, much better than design, and it's much better with those trees out of the way. Number 14, River. I don't know if you know, that was not the original location of that golf hole. That golf hole originally was about 50 yards to the right of where it's at now. And it was designed where that lake wasn't even in view. There was brush and trees and a lot of stuff down there. It wasn't even in view. And those that remember playing on that hole, you remember one thing about that green. That green was possessed. I mean, that green, if there was a pin on the middle or right side of the green, the putts would break uphill. It was a freak of nature. But it was really a kind of a benign hole that didn't fit, didn't take the lake in, and when Clyde redesigned it, they put it to the left over there, ran along the water, taken to the clubhouse, and bent it to the right. The green's in the same location, but luckily they tore that green up and rebuilt it to receive the ball coming from a different direction. I'm going to leave you with one last little fact, which I thought was interesting. So I mentioned earlier that River Landing was originally planned for 18 holes, but once it got started, they amended that plan a little bit. It was never meant to be 36 holes. The plan then went on to be, let's build 22 holes. And I said, well, why was 22 the plan? They said, well, in the river course, it's about 4 holes that potentially could come up in with rain, the river swells up. So let's build 4 additional holes that we could use to reroute to if the river comes up. And when things started progressing and we all started coming on down here and buying lots, one thing led to another. I said, let's not build 22, let's go to 36, have more home sites, more golf sites, more lake sites, and so forth. So those are some little known facts, guys. I hope the history is something that's enjoyable to you guys. Again, if you'd like a copy of this, I'm happy to send all of it to you. And given that we've come 20 years now, and given that we are literally celebrating a birthday next month, we have something special. I'm thinking, Dell, do you want to say something? Okay. We have a special cake that looks like our 20th anniversary logo, and Dawn and Zeller are going to act like Vanna, and they're going to bring this in and walk it down for everyone to see. It is consumable. And folks, when you get downstairs later, please enjoy dinner. As soon as we're done with this, as soon as, I'd like to invite Dell up. As soon as we're done with that, dinner will be served downstairs. Enjoy it. Take some time to enjoy the pictures. My staff, myself, will be around all night with any questions. Feel free to come to any one of us. We're happy to answer them. And if I can answer any more about this presentation, I'm happy to. With that, we have Dawn coming in, and Brittany said we really have to goof this up and sing happy birthday to ourselves. So, happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday, Brittany. Happy birthday to us. Ladies, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to invite the elevator now for
Thank you, Rich. I wish I was gifted with the ability to speak like Rich. That's right. Now, I wanted to say, I really originally did not plan to say anything at all. I know you're ready to go have some drinks and eat, and we're going to blow out the candles. How are we going to do that? Can we have somebody? Yeah, I think we should have somebody from the crowd. Come on, guys.
Yeah, step up.
Do we have a camera? Do we have a camera? Oh, this is great.
Wait for Brittany.
I wrote my couple notes in my hand. First thing I wanted to say was I want to thank my family for allowing me the opportunity to be such a part of such a great thing, particularly my dad and the rest of my family, all of my family, and for Pete's Vision. I want to thank my management team. We have great facilities, guys, but what we have is great people. People make the place. And I think you all will agree with that. Let's give them a hand. But without you guys, it would all be for naught. And so I want to say a huge thank you to you guys for making River Landing what it is. It takes all of us, and together we're going to have a great future. I look forward to 20 more years with you guys, every single one of you. And in fact, I hope it's 50 more. So I love y'all and thank you.
All right, folks, dinner's served downstairs. If you want to walk out down this way, you can get downstairs to the buffet. If you want to walk out the back way, you can as well. Thank you guys. Enjoy dinner.
Push the red button.
It's the red button, man.